What is going on, everybody? Aaron Smith here for Forward Gettysburg. Welcome to the show. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I'm coming to you from in front of the Lutheran Theological Seminary, probably one of the most famous buildings in all of Gettysburg, probably the building other than maybe the Evergreen Gatehouse at the cemetery there, probably one of the most famous buildings associated with the Battle of Gettysburg. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Before I get into today's episode, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping stuff, get it out of the way, say some thank yous, all that kind of good stuff, let you guys know what's going on with the channel, with the show, and then we will get into today's topic, which is going to be a very exciting one that I am especially looking forward to speaking about with you guys and exploring a little bit more about the topic. So, first things first, guys, I am so close to 100 subscribers. I cannot tell you how much excitement that brings to me that, you guys think so highly of the channel that you want to subscribe and you want to see more great Gettysburg campaign content. That means so much to me. As I always say, you guys keep watching. I'm going to keep making great content for you guys to learn more about the Gettysburg campaign together with me. We are so close to 100 subscribers. I want to do something special. I want to do something awesome. So I'm going to do a book giveaway once I reach 100 subscribers. So what I'll do is I will do a episode. I have an episode coming up where I want to talk about some questions that people have about the Battle of Gettysburg and the Gettysburg campaign. So in that episode, I'll put a little pinned comment that says, comment below to enter into our book giveaway. Make sure you're subscribed, yada, yada, yada. And then from there, I'll pick a winner. I'll comment below, shoot you my email. We'll talk back and forth and you guys will get your free book. So please, if you're watching the videos and you're not subscribed, please make sure you subscribe to make sure you are in that contest. And now, without further ado, let's get into today's video. Today on Forward Gettysburg, we are talking about John Fulton Reynolds. That's right, the commander of the 1st Corps at Gettysburg. Probably one of my favorite generals that saw action on the field here. Gone way too soon. A man struck down in his prime. If you didn't already know, that was probably a small spoiler for you guys. But nonetheless, let's get into the life and the death of John Reynolds. John Reynolds was born on September 21st, 1820. He would be about 42 years old at the Battle of Gettysburg. He was born in Lancaster County, which is maybe, an hour and a half to the east of here. He was born in Lancaster to John and Lydia Reynolds. In 1837, John Fulton Reynolds is going to be nominated to West Point, and he's going to graduate in the class of 1841. Some of his more famous classmates that also saw action in the Civil War are going to be Don Carlos Buell, commander of the Army of the Ohio, as well as Richard Garnett, who's actually going to see action here at Gettysburg himself, and he's going to fall at Gettysburg as well on the 3rd day. John Reynolds is going to go on to fight in the Mexican-American War, and he's going to be awarded 2 brevet promotions due to his gallantry and valor during that conflict. He's going to be promoted to captain and then to major next. He is going to become very good friends with Winfield Scott Hancock and Lewis Armistead. Of course, we know Winfield Scott Hancock as the commander of the 2nd Corps here at Gettysburg, and Lewis Armistead, another man that falls on the field here for the Confederate side there during Pickett's charge. There's a lot of very famous paintings of him with his cap upon his sword, breaching the wall there at the angle. So a fairly well-known Confederate general here at Gettysburg. And the interesting thing about the Mexican-American War is if you study Civil War history, you start to realize a lot of these guys became good friends and got to know each other during the Mexican-American War. So it's kind of like the 1840s Facebook, if you will, or social network, where a lot of these generals that will go on to lead these very storied careers during the Civil War, they're all getting to know each other and they're all becoming decent friends as well. After Mexico, John Reynolds is going to see some action out west. He's going to fight in the Rogue River Wars, as well as the Utah War against the Mormons. During the Civil War, John Reynolds' initial post is going to be a colonel of the 14th United States Regulars. However, before he's even able to meet up with that regiment and lead them in any type of way, he's going to be promoted to a brigadier general, and he's going to command a brigade of the Pennsylvania Reserves. During the Peninsula Campaign, he's going to occupy and actually become military governor of Fredericksburg. Also during the Peninsula Campaign, despite his gallantry at the Battle of Beaver Creek, after the Battle of Gaines Mill, he's going to be captured. And this is really the only kind of blemish, in my opinion, upon John Reynolds' records. And it's actually kind of a funny story. It goes that he was awake for the previous 2 days straight. So he was very tired, very exhausted. He found a nice quiet spot on the field, if you can believe it, and he sat down and fell asleep naturally. Well, he didn't realize that the Union Army had retreated and left him behind, and he actually became a prisoner of war. And John Reynolds was feeling very, very down about his capture, probably a little bit embarrassed. His pride might have been injured just a little bit. And his good friend Daniel Harvey Hill, who he became friends with during the Mexican-American War, he's going to see him and he's going to say, and I quote, "Reynolds, do not feel so bad about your capture. It is the fate of wars." From late June to about August, he's going to spend some time in the Libby prison camp in Virginia, in Richmond. And if you guys have never done any research or reading about the Libby prison camp, it's actually a pretty interesting place. They took an old cotton warehouse or an old warehouse of some sort and converted it into a prison camp. And in 1864, there was actually an escape in the prison camp. And basically, what the Union prisoners did is there was a small room within that warehouse, within that prison, that everybody called Rat Hell, because it was just infested with rats. And even back then, they knew that rats were dirty, rats carried disease, so on and so forth. So nobody really went into that room. Well, these Union prisoners, knowing that, started to dig a hole to the outside in this room. And the Confederate guards, they would come in, they would kind of glance around, be like, yeah, I'm not really messing with these rats, no way. And they would just, go along doing their rounds, doing whatever else they had to do in the prison. And the Union prisoners took advantage of that. And they were able to actually hide a lot of the dirt that they excavated under a layer of hay and straw that was within this rat hell. And if you can imagine digging a hole, probably with your bare hands, you might have had some tin cups or something like that, some small implements to assist in the digging, but it's mostly going to be with your bare hands. And if you can imagine digging and just being surrounded by rats and their feces, and there's probably rat carcasses all around, it's just a really, really nasty, nasty work. But nonetheless, these men were able to dig out of the Libby prison camp and escape. In August, John Reynolds is going to be exchanged in the prisoner exchange program that was going on there during that time. And upon his return, he's going to continue to lead the brigade of the Pennsylvania Reserves. During the Second Battle of Bull Run, he is going to lead a defiant stand on Henry Hill to stall the Confederates in order to give the Union Army time to escape and retreat. If you guys know about the Battle of Bull Run, you know that Stonewall Jackson had a defensive line along Stony Hill. There was a railroad cut there that he reinforced, and he was able to fend off the oncoming Union attack. Well, while he was doing that and the Union Army kept feeding into this attack, Longstreet came and attacked the Union Army's flank and swept them from the field. So during this great retreat, Reynolds is going to have a very valiant stand in order to buy time for the rest of the Union Army to fall back. And he's actually credited with saving the Union Army from destruction at the Second Battle of Bull Run. During this valiant stand, he's probably going to give one of the most famous orders of the American Civil War. That order being, "Now, boys, give them the steel. Charge, bayonets, double quick." So this was a very, very brave, heroic stand that allowed the Union Army to escape at the Second Battle of Bull Run. During the Antietam campaign, he's not going to see any action with the Army of the Potomac. He's going to be up in Pennsylvania at the request of Pennsylvania Governor Andrew Curtin. He's going to be drilling the militia troops that were called in from the emergency order when Pennsylvania caught wind that the South was trying to invade North there during 1862 in the fall. And a lot of the Union generals are going to comment on how much they missed having Reynolds there on the field with them. Reynolds was very highly thought of at the time. He was held in a very high regard, and they're really going to miss him being there at Antietam. Of course, we know Antietam was declared a Union victory, but it was more of a tactical draw. However, Antietam was key in allowing Abraham Lincoln to pass the Emancipation Proclamation, changing the entire meaning and outlook of the American Civil War. In late 1862, early 1863, after the Battle of Fredericksburg, when General Burnside, Ambrose Burnside, is relieved of command of the Army of the Potomac, and Hooker is moved up into command of the Army of the Potomac, John Reynolds is going to take command of the First Corps of the Army. At the Battle of Chancellorsville, the First Corps didn't really see any major action. Their initial positions were covering the left flank of the Union Army. However, about a day into the battle, Hooker is going to order them to move from the left flank over to the right flank. However, before they are able to get over to the right flank, Stonewall Jackson is going to make his fated flank attack there that is going to crush the 11th Corps and drive them back to the Chancellor House. So the First Corps didn't see a whole lot of action because by the time they got orders to move to the right flank was collapsing, and then later on General Hooker is going to order a general retreat. So the First Corps won't see a whole lot of action. Some statistics I saw during the Battle of Chancellorsville had the First Corps strength at about 19,000 men, and about 300 of those men are going to be casualties. So very, very low casualties, which really goes, again, to prove the point that they're not going to see a whole lot of action during that battle. On June 2nd, John Reynolds is going to meet privately with President Abraham Lincoln at Lincoln's request. When the president is requesting to see you, that's a big deal. Lincoln is going to ask Reynolds, he's going to ask him, not order him, ask him to take command of the Army of the Potomac. John Reynolds is going to think about this, and he's going to tell Abraham Lincoln, "I will take command if you can promise me that you will let me command this army how I want to command, without any outside political influences coming from Washington on the way that I do my job with this army." Abraham Lincoln was unable to comply with John Reynolds' request. He was unable to conform with the conditions that John Reynolds laid before him. So John Reynolds is going to deny command of the Army of the Potomac, and he's going to remain in command of the First Corps. On June 28th, after Hooker resigns from the Army of the Potomac, Lincoln is not going to make the same mistake twice. He's not going to ask someone to take command of the army. He's going to order someone to take command of the army, and the person that he orders is going to be George Gordon Meade. That same day, on June 28th, after Meade takes command of the army and seeing where all his corps are scattered out throughout northern and central Maryland, he's going to order the left wing of the Army of the Potomac, now under command by General John Reynolds. The first wing is going to consist of the First Corps, which is now under the command of Abner Doubleday, the Third Corps under the command of General Dan Sickles, and the 11th Corps under command of Oliver Otis Howard. He's going to move them forward from Frederick, Maryland to Emmitsburg in order to further support Buford's cavalry division. At the time, Meade had his cavalry cavalry out in a type of screening position, if you will, throughout southern Pennsylvania. We know that Buford's cavalry was here at Gettysburg. On June 30th, Pettigrew's brigade of Heath's division of A.P. Hill's 3rd Corps of the Army of Northern Virginia is going to probe out towards Gettysburg, and they're going to make their way about to the Ayers Ridge area. Buford is going to see this, and he's going to send couriers off letting people know that he saw a large Confederate force. The 1st Corps is now aware that there's an enemy presence nearby, and as we'll see later on July 1st, their support of the cavalry division will spur a full-on general engagement here at Gettysburg.
So, directly behind me is the Moritz Tavern, or the building that would have been called the Moritz Tavern during the Battle of Gettysburg. I am on the very south end of the Emmitsburg Road, right before it meets in a junction with modern-day Route 15. So I'm going to apologize ahead of time for any interference from traffic going nearby. This is a pretty heavily trafficked area. This is a private residence, so I'm parked off to the side, off the private property. But either way, this video just wouldn't be complete if I didn't do at least a little filming here at the Moritz Tavern. So this is where John Reynolds is going to spend the night of June 30th while his troops are encamped at Marsh Creek, which is going to be in the nearby little village of Barlow Greenmount, named for Francis Barlow, an 11th Corps divisional commander at the Battle of Gettysburg. The night of June 30th, General Oliver Otis Howard is going to meet with John Reynolds at the Moritz Tavern right here behind me, and they're going to discuss strategy and plans and enemy positions that they've been reported by the cavalry, and so on and so forth. Howard is going to depart around 11 p.m. John Reynolds is going to spend his last night alive sleeping on some chairs that he positioned to make a bed of sorts. And there's actually some historical debate. Some sources, for example, Harry Fonz's book, and I want to say even Coddington's book, when they detail the first day, of course, Harry Fonz's Gettysburg, the first day, and Coddington's Gettysburg, a study in command. They're going to say that John Reynolds is going to spend the night sleeping on the floor of the Moritz Tavern. The National Park Service, they actually have the chairs there that were there in the Moritz Tavern, claiming that that is where he spent his last night, asleep on those chairs lined up to make a makeshift bed. But either way, no matter what side you fall on the debate, John Reynolds is going to spend his last night alive here at the Moritz Tavern on June 30th, 1863.
So, on July 1st, Henry Heath's division is going to probe towards Gettysburg in what is now described as a reconnaissance in force. They want to see exactly what's going on at Gettysburg. So, while they're doing that, Buford has set up a defense of cavalry vedettes that are going to stall the oncoming rebel invaders. The cavalry stalling, the cavalry delaying action is going to be incredibly successful, so successful that Buford is going to have time to send couriers out towards where the 1st Corps and John Reynolds is encamped. He's going to send couriers requesting Reynolds to bring up the 1st Corps. The 1st Corps is going to depart their camp around 8 a.m. in the morning. They're about 7 miles south of Gettysburg down the Emmitsburg Road, which is running directly behind me here. John Reynolds, he's going to ride ahead of his corps, of his lines, and he's going to meet with Buford, and Buford is going to state and describe to him the state of the field, and Reynolds is going to see exactly what is going on for himself. According to Harry Fonz's Gettysburg the First Day book, which of course is an excellent read, I highly recommend it, he's going to say that Reynolds is going to arrive to the field just as Archer and Davis's brigade are deploying from line to column right along Ayers Ridge, preparing to move forward and engage the defending cavalrymen there. Reynolds is is going to ride back and meet his lead brigade, which is commanded by a man named Lysander Cutler. And Brigadier General Cutler, they're going to bring his troops forward, and they're going to clear some rail fences. Now, obviously, these probably aren't the original fences, but they're going to clear these very rail fences behind me. And as the First Corps begins to come in towards Gettysburg, they're going to turn off here on a shortcut Reynolds actually found himself, actually carved out himself. And they're going to turn off of the Emmitsburg Road here, right around the Cadore Farm, which is this building directly behind me. And they're going to make their way toward McPherson Ridge and the defending cavalry. So Cutler's brigade is going to make their way through the farm fields right off of the Emmitsburg Road. They turned off by the Cadore Barn, and they're making their way through the fields on the outskirts of the town of Gettysburg, and they're going to make their way past this area, which behind me is the Earps Woods, now known as the McPherson's Woods, or even the Reynolds Woods, if you will. Has many names, but they're going to make their way past this area, and they're going to take positions north of the Chambersburg Pike. As they're arriving, Hall's 2nd Maine Battery of Artillery, they're going to be ordered to take a position just north of the Chambersburg Pike as well, between the pike and the railroad cut. Now, what's going to happen is that part of Cutler's brigade, the 147th New York, is they're going to get cut off on their way into position north of the pike, and they're going to actually get stalled behind just a little bit. Reynolds is going to order Cutler to support Hall's battery north of the pike. Now, since they got cut off and there was a confusion, two of the regiments of Cutler's brigade, the 14th Brooklyn, also known as the 84th New York. The 14th Brooklyn was their original militia name. They were so attached to the name that they preferred to go by the 14th Brooklyn, but their government name, if you will, was the 84th New York. Alongside of the 95th New York, they're going to be put under the command of Colonel Edward Fowler as a type of demi-brigade, and they're going to take positions south of the Chambersburg Pike near the McPherson Farm, near the barn and the other buildings that were there at the time of the battle, which unfortunately are not there now. Only the barn remains. But they're going to take positions there, and they're going to begin engaging with Davis's brigade. The next brigade that is going to take position here from the 1st Corps, the 1st Division, is going to be the 1st Brigade of the 1st Division of the 1st Corps. That's right, drum roll please, enter dramatic fireworks, etc., etc., the Iron Brigade of the West. Probably one of, if not the most elite brigades of the Army of the Potomac. They earned their name at the Battle of South Mountain. Look at those boys there standing like iron. So, these men are incredibly grizzled, vicious fighters. The 1st Regiment of the Iron Brigade that's going to take positions here in McPherson's Woods is going to be the 2nd Wisconsin. They're going to come over the rise of McPherson's Ridge, and they're going to see Archer's Brigade of Tennesseans and Alabamians charging up this hill here, and they're going to engage them. Archer's brigade is going to provide a withering fire upon the 2nd Wisconsin, but as the 2nd Wisconsin is charging down this hill, they're going to be loading and firing, bayonets attached, ready to engage these Southerners. As the 2nd Wisconsin is making their vicious charge down into these woods, General Reynolds is going to come behind their line on what is described as a powerful black horse. And Reynolds is going to be directing these men, and he's going to tell them, "Forward, men, forward for God's sake," and drive those fellows out of the woods. John Reynolds realizes the importance of this position here, the woods behind me. He realizes this is a key position to the developing Union line here on McPherson's Ridge, the developing Union defense. As John Reynolds is inspiring these men to move forward and drive the Confederates out of these woods and back across Willoughby Run, he's going to look behind him, and he's looking to see the next regiment of the Iron Brigade coming in. And John Reynolds is going to be shot in the back of his neck near the base of his skull. He's going to reel from the saddle and fall to the ground. Reynolds' body is going to be taken to the George house in Gettysburg along the Emmitsburg Road. That house is now, I believe, an old-timey photography studio right across from the Dairy Queen, to give you a sense of where it is. His body's going to be taken there, and they're going to search the town for a coffin, but no empty coffin is available in the town of Gettysburg. The irony of that statement. So eventually they're going to find a stonemason who has an empty box, and they're going to place Reynolds' body into that box. However, the box is going to be too short, so they're going to have to take out one end of the box, and his feet are going to be dangling out of the coffin. He's going to be placed in an ambulance, and he's going to be taken to Taneytown. And on the way to Taneytown, Winfield Scott Hancock, his old friend from the Mexican-American War, is going to see Reynolds' lifeless body. And now the battle has taken on an entirely new meaning. From Taneytown, his body is going to be taken to Westminster, Maryland, somewhat nearby to Taneytown. And Westminster was an important railroad head for the Union. That was where their supply line was. That was their key railroad supply point. And Reynolds' body is going to be placed on a rail car at Westminster and taken to Baltimore. From Baltimore, Reynolds' body is going to be taken to Philadelphia by rail. And from Philadelphia, on a private train car, his body is going to be taken to his home of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The citizens of Lancaster were celebrating the 4th of July. They had their flags waving high, they had their decorations out front. But upon hearing the news of General Reynolds' arrival in death on July 4th, the people of Lancaster are going to put their flags at half-mast in honor of their fallen hometown hero. There will be a simple graveside service for this great man, this great Union general, and John Reynolds will be returned to the earth. John Reynolds is going to be buried in Lancaster Cemetery in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and you can go visit his grave and pay your respects to this very day. After Reynolds' death, there is no strong leadership on the field here at Gettysburg. And due to that lack of strong leadership, the Union line will eventually crumble in the afternoon, and they'll run back through town and take positions along Cemetery Hill. The hill that, according to many sources, John Reynolds identified as the key position to this battle. Good ground. Good ground. Thank you guys so much for joining me. As always, I am your host, Aaron Smith. If you liked this video, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate all your support. Like I said, I am very, very close to reaching 100 subscribers. You guys keep watching. I'm going to keep making great Gettysburg and Civil War related content. And as always, I will catch you on the next one.